So since the year started, we've been talking a lot about goals in general, and we've made the last episode on goals and if they are important. We've also had many conversations about risks and why we generally need to take risks in our life. And I thought that since it is still fresh in the new year and we're still kind of in this goals mindset, I thought we could do an episode especially on risks and why we should aim to take risks in our lives, especially when we are setting this type of goals, especially if we're, trying to learn new things that we have never learned before or traveling to new places or making new friends. It's all about risks in essence. So what is your perspective on risks in general?
I believe that risks exist everywhere in the world. Like I've mentioned this before on one of the previous episodes at some point when I said that regardless what you do, you're always taking a risk, whether you're aware of it or not. Some of the risks include you, for example, going out of the house and risking something happening to you. Risks are driving in a bus and trusting the driver that you don't know at all, that will be able to get you to safety with his own driving skills. Risk of driving your own car, risk of going to work, risk of never going to work.
Basically anything.
Anything. Sure, the percentages or maybe the chances of a bad outcome differs from one situation to another. So we know, for example, that I don't have any numbers to be honest, but we know that very little amount of people die due to accidents, for example. So we know that there's a risk there, but it's not entirely, or it's unlikely to happen. At some point, I stopped seeing risks as risks, I guess. So when I started realizing that we take risks every day, nevertheless of the situation, that's when I kind of stopped looking at risks as the common person would do. And by the common person, I mean the way most people define risks or look at risks.
Okay, now I have to do this. How would you define risks then?
Okay, so the common definition, or when we're talking about risks in general, a lot of people tend to relate risks to, taking risk in order to progress in life.
Sure.
You're doing something with the chances of it not working out or with the chances of you getting hurt or something.
Yeah.
And we don't take these risks because, they're risks and people are afraid of risks. But when I started realizing that, okay, no, we're actually taking risks every day, whether it's subconsciously or subconsciously, then the problem is not actually the risks themselves, but the problem is what's behind those risks.
Okay.
So,
if it is worth, you mean if it's worth taking this risk and the leap, or what do you mean what's behind the risk?
Behind the risk is the fear.
Okay, that's what you mean. You mean philosophically what's behind the risk. Okay.
So, the risk is nothing just but a term that we came up with. And for some reason, it got into a trend lately, I guess, when a lot of people were talking about taking more risks, and why you should be taking risks and why you should be doing this and that. But for me, it was never about why I should take more risks. It's more like, what's the fear that's stopping me from taking the risks? Because, like I said, we take risks every day.
I mean, exactly. You could ask that broadly in general. Since everything we do is risky. And I think most people are aware that anything they do has a risk, like crossing the street. So why are we so afraid of taking specific risks that are related to our goals or our things that we want to have and achieve, I guess? Why is it different there?
I believe there's multiple factors at hand. If you're talking about the risks that we take on a daily basis, it's just things that we're common with.
Things that are so in our awareness that they are normal to us?
It's not only this, but it's like we know that we've crossed the street based on past experiences without anything
we have
happening.
Evidence that
it's not only this, but it also becomes a little bit automatic in our brain. So you don't need to stop and think, okay, I'm going to cross the street and I have to watch for the cars, and then I have to watch for this and this. Then I have to be careful that my first step forward is going to be with my right or with my left foot, and then there's a stair here. No, you just do it with that.
Automatic. Part of your bubble, part of your comfort zone, in a sense.
And that includes technically everything.
Yeah.
But when it comes to taking on new things in life, whatever you want to call them, projects, businesses, ideas, subject,
The
stuff to
unfamiliar.
learn, whatever, something completely new, we usually end up getting stuck in this thinking. We think that, okay, what are the steps? And when you start thinking about the steps,
That's where you get anxiety.
that's when the fears
Yeah.
kick in. And now the fears could be way, way too different. There's many, many fears that I can just name right now quickly if you want to. But after the fears, we start looking at things as risky, or there's a huge risk at hand, or this and this. And then that definition, or by looking at it in that perspective, we'll start getting anxious of,
So we get anxious by the steps that we have to make, because I feel like most people can dream. Most people are like, they feel good when they talk about the dream or things they want to achieve in many years. But once they start thinking about these steps, the things that will get them, that's when the fear arises. So
that's
why
kind of when the fear arrives.
But why?
Now there's so if you're gonna go into fears, the fears that are on top of my head right now, you've got fear of failure, which is common and everybody knows what that is. We've got fear of success, which I've talked about before, and then you've got fear of the unknown. Then you've got fear of change.
I guess it's related to change the most, maybe.
It's really different. And then you've got the subjective fears.
Yeah.
Now the subjective fears are technically fears that got kind of integrated in who you are based on your past and your perception of how the world around you is. So let's say, it's like every kind of fear that I've mentioned so far can be defined subjectively.
Sure.
And then you take the more subjective, like you take it even more subjectively, and then you realize that, okay, based on who I am and based on what I'm looking at for the future and this, the fear of failure, for example, for you could mean one thing, for me could mean something entirely different. Why? Because I'm connecting it to my subjective experience.
It's connected to something else.
So it's like fear of failure is there nevertheless, but I have made subgenres out of it based on my experience. So when you're making the plans, these fears, like I'm just going to be repeating myself here a little bit. When you're trying to figure out a plan to get to where you want to get, or do what you want to do, or learn whatever it is that you're trying to learn, these fears would start kicking in based on, what you're doing, what is it related to, what are your circumstances, where you are in life, and all of these kind of things. And then, at least based on my experience and experience of many people that I've known or gotten to know, it's usually that we ignore the fear and we focus more or define it more as risk. And then by doing this,
it's like a mask
default way,
from
exactly,
fear. Yeah.
Exactly. When you do this in a default way, you just start thinking that, okay, no, the problem is not with my fears, but the problem is the risk. And
that I'm risking something, that I'm about to lose something in order to get that thing.
Exactly.
And we start to worry about that thing that we might lose, whether it's our health, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a job. And we start to feel that this thing that we are losing could completely destroy us, maybe, even though maybe in reality...
It could be many things.
But maybe in reality, if you actually go through and take that risk... the loss that you have imagined is probably not going to be as damaging or as big as you thought about it. So it's obviously related to fears, and it's becoming more and more obvious the more you talk, that it's like a mask, that risk is just a mask for fears.
Definitely.
For some reason that our brain want to perceive it differently, so that we are more convinced to not do the thing, It's like when we have jealousy and we mask it with anger, it's like something deep that we don't want to face, where we just put another label on it.
It's not just that, but it's also a kind of self-defense mechanism.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the brain also want to protect you.
For some reason.
The brain doesn't want to get you. It's survival instinct,
Yeah.
It's
not just survival. I think it's adaptation, because we're so adapted to what we have in the moment that we don't want to risk losing something to have to adapt to something new. Because I don't think we don't like adapt. It's something integrated in us, but we don't like to do it. Like we don't like imagining living in a worse situation or just something being taken away from us. Even though after the fact, after a while, when we have adapted to the thing, we realize that I can live with this, and it's not that bad. Maybe it's even better. But for some reason, we just want to avoid that. So maybe we just, as you said, like a survival instinct, and we do it subconsciously in most
I
cases.
feel like once we start kind of trying to identify the fears that we've got and why we have them. So like I said, like I'm just going to take a step back here. Once I've stopped looking at risks as risks, but more as like fears. And whenever I'm noticing, okay, there's something that I'm not doing here, or I'm avoiding doing it. And my first instinct became to be like, okay, what's the fear that's holding me back from taking on the risks? And then once you've identified the fear, you can kind of have a talk with it in the sense of like, I guess I'm having a fear about this, or I'm fearful about that. And then once you start to understand the root of the fears and why you have them, and you kind of try to switch that fear into maybe a drive, something that motivates you, that pushes you forward, or that reminds
Changing
you of
perspective,
why you should be doing it anyways, regardless of the fear. I think that makes things a lot easier, you know?
I think the interesting thing is that when I think about this, like this type of fears and not wanting to take risks, I would imagine someone who had some trauma in his childhood, and then for that reason he would become very fearful about certain things and avoid taking risks. But it's not true, because
It's not
necessarily, because even from my example, I remember when I was a teenager and even in my early 20s, I took risks all the time. Like I left my parents on my own, and I went to Europe on my own. I did many things on my own, and I didn't care less. I didn't even think much about what I might lose. Maybe because I didn't have much, so I felt like there's nothing left to lose. But now I have switched completely to the opposite way, where
I think
it's hard for me to take risks sometimes.
It's more related to your self-awareness.
Sure.
Like in the past, you were not self-aware.
Not at all.
You didn't even. I'm almost certainly sure that in the past, when you left, you were not aware of the fact that you're leaving and that there's a risk to it.
I just did it.
You just did it. Exactly.
Deciding on the moment.
Exactly. But right now, whenever you're trying to make a decision, you're kind of too self-aware of what you've got.
It's self-awareness plus too much information about the thing. Sometimes too much information backfire.
It's not only this, but look at it like this. Like if you want to take it a bit deeper, you've got your own life right now, which is kind of how you define who you are.
More, yeah. Sure.
You know, so if you want to take on a risk, at least a risk that's a bit bigger and that can entail you changing your entire life. Before, because you were not as self-aware and as grown up, you didn't have that kind of identity.
There wasn't much thought put into it.
You didn't have that much of, a personality of like, this is who I am. This is, but right now you've got who you identify yourself
as. A stable
as,
identity.
Which is like, okay, I am this guy who does this and this. I have this and this. I have this and that, and then if you decide to take a huge risk, which is moving, for example, to another country again and leaving all of this behind, then that thing that you've been building for the past few years,
completely gone, almost completely gone.
It's kind of crashes. You only got, your base work, your base constructions left.
Your base character and the thing that you've
learned. And then everything else is gone. And then that kind of scares us,
Because it's a destination unknown. We don't know how it's going to be. We don't know what is going to be similar, what's going to be different, and are we going to meet new people? Are we going to find the right job for us? Are we going to find the right place? There's so many variables in play that are out of our control.
I asked you that question a few days ago, and I told you what's the difference between anxiety and excitement in your body.
I think it's just a perspective.
Exactly.
Because you get this, for me at least, I get the sensation in the same place.
Exactly.
That's why sometimes the one thing could make me excited and anxious, and I get it in the same place where I can't even eat anymore.
And I've told you this last time we talked.
It's just a perspective.
On the podcast, it was privately. And we've talked about exactly this topic, and I said that it scares a lot of people to take this kind of risks. But being scared or fear is kind of the same as anxiety or being anxious of something. But for me, it excites me. And it doesn't excite me because, it's not because I love the unknown. As much as I would love to say that I love the unknown, I kind of like the known and the controllables more. Because it's under my control. Yeah. I know what's about to happen. I know how to handle it, It's our comfort zone.
It's kind of it's the same for me, mostly.
But at the same time, when it comes to taking on risks or having like a new start or something like this, there's something about it that I personally romanticize, because to every end there's a beginning, and to every beginning there's an end.
True.
And when something ends, something new begins. And for something new to begin, something has to end. It's a circle of life. Look at nature, for example. In order for trees to grow new leaves, fall has to come, and the old leaves has to go away. And that's how trees grow stronger, and their branches and their leaves grow bigger and better with time. And I've told you this, like when I left for the first time and I completely crushed my identity and I tried to build a new one, it kind of got me to explore new areas in myself, because my surrounding didn't know who I am. So I could explore new potentials of who I could be, or go into new directions in my life and explore these to, make a new persona, if that's what you want to call it. So technically, by taking a risk that could entail crushing who we are or who we think or perceive ourselves to be, could in fact lead us closer to who we are supposed to be. And there's an element of surprise there. But I guess for a lot of people to be able to get excited about that, because in the past I wouldn't get excited about it. But right now, since I know, I've got a little bit more of trust in myself that I can handle the situation. That's why I know that I can romanticize about it. And it excites me to know, okay, like whatever the outcome is, I know I'll be able to handle it.
See,
So
that's
it kind of excites me to do this kind of stuff.
I think it's a healthy mindset to have, but I still think that risk has to be a little bit calculated. You're not just taking risks left and right. I think that's more like being reckless and kind of stupid in a sense.
It's like you're adding a little bit of salt to the food, or you're just throwing the whole salt in the food and you're hoping
it has to be about ratio, and is it worth doing? Like, are you risking everything in your life for something that might not be? We've talked about it. Like, I told you in university that I've always thought about being a therapist, and maybe I want to major psychology and study for 6-7 years until maybe one day I get an office and be a therapist. Then I start imagining, do I really want to do that? Do I really want to spend 7 years doing only that in order to be a therapist? Is it that attractive to me? The answer was no. So I don't do it. It's something I might like.
Now you're kind of getting a little bit off topic, because we're switching from taking on risks that would lead you to something.
But this is also a risk that would lead you to something.
But you don't want it. You don't want the outcome.
I do want the outcome, but I don't want it enough.
Exactly.
That's what I mean, calculated risk.
For me, it's like when you say you don't want something enough, it means that you don't want it.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree because
if
it's always about the thing behind it. Like, it's something you can get, but you are taking...
Take this.
You're taking things away. Are the things you're taking away worth the thing, or maybe there's better alternatives to achieve something similar, but with a risk that is more to your liking?
Take this example from your own life. You don't like going to the gym, and you probably
I'm okay with it.
Prefer not to go to the gym.
Sure.
But you still do it. Why?
Yeah. Because the reward is...
Because you want the outcome.
I want the outcome, and I like the feeling after going to the gym as well.
But you want the outcome, and you know that the outcome is something that you want, or that's worthwhile.
And the risk is not really high.
But then, on the other hand, if you go to study psychology, you don't want to go through the process. You would like to have the outcome.
No, I kind of do like the process, but I feel like...
Sorry, I phrased that wrong. You kind of would like to be a psychologist, but you wouldn't like the outcome out of the whole situation.
I wouldn't like the big investment for the outcome that is not insanely attractive to me. Like, there's so much time investment that I would rather, for example, I make videos that are related to psychology, and for me this is more enjoyable, and the investment in it is more to my liking, and just a more attractive risk.
You're kind of losing me here.
Why?
Because you're saying that you don't. It's not worth the investments, but at the same time, you're saying that you like, or you want the process, which is studying psychology. But for me, the investment in time, in money, because you know how things in Germany are, where
you can't work, you can't do this, you can't do that. There's a lot of things.
But if you were in a different country, for example,
If
would
it's-
you-
I
would
would,
you-
I
would
would,
you-
I would probably do it. I would.
You would probably do
I
it.
would probably do it.
so it's not that you don't want it; it's that
Yeah.
the circumstances that you're in.
Exactly. The risk for it in
Mm-hmm.
this moment in time, in my circumstances, is just not worth it. So it's not only the outcome that I like, I also like the I like studying
Mm-hmm.
in general, and I don't mind the university model of studying,
Mm-hmm.
especially topics like this. But
So now, see, now we're getting into a different topic. So if the process for you, you're saying that the risk for you is not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's multiple ways of trying to look at it, you know. For me, if the risk is not worth it, and I know that I'm saying this not based on fear, but based on actually me thinking that it's not really worth it, or it's not something that I actually want to do,
there is some fear to it.
you know,
There is some
then
fear
I would
to
let
it.
it go. So, for example, like, you know, I would also love to be a psychologist or a therapist, or at least study the course, like have something to do with it in university.
Some way, yeah.
But at the same time, I know that I wouldn't like I don't want that outcome. I don't want that lifestyle. I just want to be able to study it and see where that leads me. So for me, it's not really wanting the outcome or wanting to go through the process. For me, it's like, it's something that I would like to do, but it's not something that I'm willing to invest in.
But you see, for me, it is a risk because there's fear behind it, which is I'm gonna have to live in lower standards, and I can't do the things that I like anymore. Mostly, like I won't have time to do podcasts. I won't have time to do videos, which are things that are very important to me, and I don't want to risk losing.
Technically, you will, because you're going to be replacing your job with the studies.
Maybe, but
So-
you see, there is risk, there is fear, and it's like
Definitely.
it's something that I thought about a lot, and I felt like the alternatives felt more aligning with what I want, and I took a lesser risk, but it felt better for me.
But
you know?
technically, like even though you're not studying, you're still going for the same outcome that you want.
Sure, in
So-
a way, yeah.
Just to take a step back, I was saying that there's a difference between you wanting something and you not wanting to take on the risk for something.
Sure.
And before that, we were talking about the fears. So there's different metrics here at hand. So the first one is like, which is of course the most important basic one. Do you want it or not?
Yeah.
You
But
know.
sometimes the answer, like, sure, you can either say yes or no, but
Regardless of
answer-
this, I look at it like, do you want it or not? There's only like this question is a black and white
yeah,
question.
it's
You know, the question itself is a black and white.
You
It's
need to think about it deeply, but there's
it's
one
either
answer.
yes or no.
Yeah.
You can't be like yes, but or no, but. It's either yes or no.
But you can want
And then
many
once
things that
you
you
know-
can want contradicting things at the same
Definitely,
time,
definitely,
sometimes, you know?
definitely. Which is why then you go to step 2.
Yeah.
Like, first question is, do you want it or not? Do you really, genuinely, with all of your existence, want it or not?
Wholeheartedly.
If you say yes and I want it, then
Go
goes
step
to the
two.
next step 2. What am I going to be risking
Yeah.
to get what I want? And then comes step 3. Is it worth it?
Yeah.
Because everything that you decide to take into in your life, beside the risk that's, you know, entailed with it or that comes along with it, there's also a lot of adaptivity to it in your life. So there's a lot of things in your life that gotta go in order for new
Replace.
things to come.
Yeah.
Exactly. And now that's where the question comes. Is it worth it or not? Do you want it or not? You know, and then you start kind of knowing like, okay, I want it. I want to take
But-
on the risks. The circumstances are allowing me to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that it's worth it. Then at this point, the only thing that's holding you back is you.
Yeah.
But of course, sometimes, like in your case, for example, the circumstances are different. You want it, but the circumstances
It's not only
Would
the
be-
circumstances.
would be a little bit different. And then you've got other metrics at hand. And then I guess that's when things kind of start getting a little bit complicated because then there's too much thinking.
It's not
So-
only that.
So
Like,
when I dropped out of college, there was a lot of thinking. You know,
It's also a risk.
lot of thinking. And none of that thinking got me anywhere.
Yeah.
Until one day I was like, okay, I'm dropping out. You have to imagine the process of me thinking about dropping out for like a year and a half.
yeah.
And I was still studying while I'm thinking about that.
It's not easy.
And I didn't, because of too many faults, too many metrics, too many factors, too many this and that, too many this and that, I couldn't come with an answer. When I was asking myself, do I want to study or not, there was always a but in the answer. It was never black and white.
Yeah.
You know? And that's what I know. Like, okay, I actually don't want to study then. I'm just making up excuses when I'm saying yes, but then I don't really want it because my answers there are more clear. But when I'm saying no, but then those are just kind of excuses so I can stick up with my university for the sake of having a degree. And that's when things started becoming more clear to me. And that's when I was like, okay, you know what? We're not going to think about it anymore. We're just going to do it.
That's when you're too, like, thinking is correct, but how much are you thinking about
Exactly. That's what I was trying to get to as well. Because because the process of thinking about whether to do something or not can be too long. And the time that's lost
in between
is not going to come back.
Exactly. There's something important I want to mention, that also when you're thinking about doing something that has a risk behind it, I think this is what I forgot to mention about the psychology thing, is that what are the other options? What are the variables? So I started asking myself, what I care about is mostly psychology and philosophy. So if I don't want to take that risk and go to university, what are my alternatives? How can I be working in some way and engaging my life in these topics if I don't go university? Okay. The first answer that came to me, okay, I can do a course online. And I did that in psychology during COVID, where I had nothing else to do. And I started to learn a lot. And then other ideas started to come. Okay, I can start making YouTube videos. And then we started talking about doing this podcast because we were talking about psychology before. And sure, this option is also risky, but it felt more in my wheelhouse, I guess. Something is more realistic to me, and it works to my circumstances.
So technically, you're still working toward the same outcome. You just took a different path.
It's kind of the same outcome. Maybe it's like the same end goal, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah.
Like being engaged in psychology and philosophy. And I am doing that. It's just not the traditional way, not the methodical way,
in a different
just my own way.
Different approach. Yeah,
exactly. So what are the alternatives? Do you have other options to do this? If it's maybe your only option, it's something you really want, you can't imagine another life for you, then maybe the risk is worth taking no matter what.
Now kind of we're talking about you knowing that you want something.
Sure. Absolutely. I mean? Exactly. That's when you answer the first question. Do you want it or not?
Exactly.
And that's not easy to answer.
That's like going back to the basics. Because now I want to elaborate, because I said that the question is black or white. You know, it's either you want it or you don't want it. Because if you want something, it's really hard to explain, because I've tried to explain this in many different ways, but I never found the right terms for it. If you're not sure whether you want something or not, then you don't really want it. Because the chances are that you're lying to yourself. The chances that you're lying to yourself are way higher than the chances that you're not.
That is true. Because but you need a level of self-awareness to know that this is happening.
Look at it like this. For those who are not following me so far. If you want something, you will find a way. This is a really simple way. If you want something, you will find a way. If you don't want something, you'll find excuses. The excuses are, or you're going to lie to yourself. They're going to be either for you to stick up with a thing because you want to please other people, or because that's where you think your self-worth is, or because you have some ulterior motive. Or you're going to be lying to yourself that you don't want it, but you should be doing it. You know, but technically, you're going to be lying to yourself that you should stick with it, or do it, or that you want it. But that's when you're not sure. If you're sure about something, you know, you'll do it. It's like
you'll feel it.
It's like if I come to you and I ask you, what do you want to eat today? And you know that today you feel or you want to eat a burger right now. And I come to you and ask, what do you want to eat? You're not going to be like, I guess a burger would be nice. You're going to be like, burger. I want to eat a burger right now. There's no room for discussion because you know that you want it. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
When you're not really entirely sure and you're just thinking about it, there's, I guess...
But you see, this is not 100% true.
It's like the mind games.
But this is not 100% true, because you need to keep in account people who are indecisive in their nature. And I could be included in that category. Because I know the things that I want, but I also know other things that I want. So what do I want more? Do I want this? Or
why do you want this and why do you want this?
This is indecisiveness, because you can see the different, okay, what will happen if I do this? What would happen? This is just a subcategory of individuals, I guess.
But it's also indecisiveness.
It's kind of being unsure.
Indecisiveness comes from you thinking or letting other people influence you.
Partly true. Partly true.
Because I used to be indecisive, and I still am to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But again, we're gonna go back. I'm gonna go back to the basic human needs, basic human nature. When you are in the jungle and you're hungry, then you know that you want to eat.
Sure.
You know that you want to eat. There is no room for discussion. When you want something, you know that you want it. But now, especially now in today's society, which is why it's really hard, and which is why
Many
a lot of
choices.
people are indecisive. It's not just many choices. We've got so much input.
Yeah.
Social media. So I don't know if has it ever happened to you that you wanted to eat something, or you thought you wanted to eat something? No, let's take it from the. You wanted to eat something, and the second that you wanted to eat it, and the thought came, some other thought creeped in that told you that this is not healthy, based on a social media post that you saw, without you actually knowing whether it's healthy or not.
Absolutely.
And then what happens?
This happens all the time.
And then what happens with your
you start to
decision-making?
want to make another decision.
There you go.
Okay. Once you explain it in this way, I would say that's mostly true. That's why.
Like I would say that solves. I'm not saying that you can always make a decision. There is situations in life where you've got it. Like I'm talking about extreme hard situations. That making a decision there is really hard. Like I'm gonna take it.
If you're living in modern society, even if you're not on social media, you are kind of influenced by it.
Of course, because everyone else around you is influenced.
Exactly.
But just so people get it a little bit more, even if you are like, it's sometimes you are indecisive because you've got no other choice. So I'm gonna go to the extreme here and take another extreme example. Say that you've got a loved one laying in bed in a coma due to some disease, and it's up to you to decide whether you turn off the machines and you call it off and let the person die, or whether you let the machines run so this person, with the hope that this person might survive. Now that's a situation where making a decision is tough.
Yeah.
And this is extreme case. This is like the extreme case. And there's a lot of cases in life like this. I'm not denying that. But for the most part, our decision making is fucked because
of influence.
Because of influence. Whether it's social media, whether it's others, whether it's a book that you read, whether it's
you got me here. You got me.
Whether it's this or that, And once we realize that, I guess, once I started looking at it from this perspective, at least, that's when I started thinking like, okay, wanting is black and white. You either want it,
you either want something or not,
or you're lying to yourself.
But then
about
you can't
wanting
exactly.
It or not wanting
so you need to ask yourself, why do you want that thing? Do you actually want it, or did someone tell you you want it?
That's why I was emphasizing on genuinely and fully want it. That's when I said like, do you really and genuinely want it? That was my emphasis on it.
Okay,
it sounds really complicated.
Okay, wait a second. Then there is something important to answer here. We've talked about risks, but now we're talking about knowing what you want. Because if you want to take a risk, you need to know what you want. So how do we answer this question? How do you actually know if you want something or not? How do you get out of that influence bubble, I guess? How do you figure out what is your thing and what people are telling you what to do?
That's, I think, and this is gonna sound really vague, okay? But I believe this is a process that's really subjective.
Okay.
Just like starting with self-help. This is really subjective. Because, for example, what worked for me to kind of determine what I want wouldn't necessarily work for other people.
Sure.
So that process of determining what you want and what you don't want doesn't really, it's kind of subjective. Everybody has to go through it one way or another. Like one of the things that work is trying things out, but that includes a lot of risks. Some people might not be able to handle it. One of the other things is to meditate and imagine yourself doing the things. which is kind of gives you the experience.
That's
like,
a good one.
Do you want it or not?
That's a good one.
And how do you feel when you're doing it? And then
imagine the process as well. Imagining the process, not just the outcome.
Definitely, not just the outcome. Yeah, you're imagining the process. You're imagining how your daily life is being while you're doing the process, and how your daily life is going to be after you've reached the level that you wanted to. The third option, which I guess is a little bit more on the harder end of things, which is like just destroy everything that belongs. Unlearn to be who you are. Unlearn everything that you think is who you are.
I guess you need distance in that way. You need to be in isolation.
A little bit in isolation. It doesn't have to be complete isolation, but just a little bit of isolation and questioning everything that you know, that you thought that you knew.
Getting an existential crisis, and
which is what happened to me what happened to me when I got into that phase of nihilism, and I was questioning everything, and I was looking at everything in a negative way. That's when so that's the path that kind of happened to me. I didn't choose that process. I just got into that phase somehow where I became nihilistic and neurotic, and I was questioning everything, and I was unlearning a lot of the things that I thought were who I am, or at least that I thought were who I thought myself to be. Anyways, there's many ways, like I said, but it's always subjective, and I guess one way or another, it just happens to us whether we want it or not. It's just how life kind of works. You just get in a phase where you start realizing that you're not doing what you want to do.
Sure, but everyone reaches that phase
eventually.
You don't know when. You
don't know when.
That's the thing with life, I guess.
It's the same with change, though. You don't change because somebody comes to you and tells you to change. You change because you've come to a point in life where you're realizing that, okay, maybe I should change.
Yeah, something hit you. You reach a point, or for some people it's midlife crisis. For some people it's something else, something traumatic, and that's when you start to realize, okay, I need to change, and you figure who you are, and that's where you realize what you want and not want. But even when you realize that, you still need to do this self-check. Okay, is this really what I want, or this was my experience at least? And then you start to think about taking risk. Okay, is this worth pursuing? Is it not? What am I going to lose here? So
yeah, we kind of got off topic here, but I guess it's also because if you're gonna talk about risks, there's a lot of details that have or has to go with it. So even though we got off topic, I still believe that we kind of came up with a good conclusion, at least.
Yeah.
And
you also made me think about things that I didn't consider, like when you mentioned how I know we are influenced by other things, but I didn't think about it in this way, that when you're thinking about doing something and asking yourself, is this really what I want to do or not? And the answer, if you don't know it, then you're probably influenced by something else. Because if this influence doesn't exist, if you weren't on social media at that certain point, or if you weren't talking to a friend at a certain point, then maybe the answer would be clear and you wouldn't be indecisive in the moment. So that was really important to talk about. I kind of learned something here.
There was this reel that is on social media somewhere where somebody was asking an older man, about his hot take of the day or something like this, and the man said, how far would you dream if money was not a problem, if you wouldn't get judged, if all of your current issues or all of your current worries did not exist?
Barriers.
So you don't have any problems, you don't have any circumstances, you can dream whatever you want, any life that you want, and you can have that life.
Yeah.
And when I heard that for the first time, my answer to that question was the opposite of my answers, or how my answers came till that point. And that's when I was like, shit.
That's
everything that I've been wanting in my life has just been from somebody else. Whether it's society, whether it's pressure of money, whether it's this and that. And that's when I started kind of getting more and more into questioning it. And then when I started realizing, okay, like what I want is definitely not what I've been doing so far. And that's when I started going as far away possible as from what I've been doing so far, just so I can kind of open maybe a new path that would tell me something, or that I would learn something, or I would notice something else that I would want. And yeah, whether we want to admit it or not, like, this is related to free will as well. You know, it's just that a lot of the decisions that we take and make is just not, entirely our own free will. It's mostly influenced by
That's
other
true.
people.
And
That doesn't mean that it has to be bad. You know, everything has its bad and its negatives and its positives. That's why people say you are the sum of the 5 closest people to you. So if the people that are closest to you are kind of in support of you becoming who you want to be, not who you assumed you were supposed to be, then eventually you will get on that path. You know.
Before we end the episode, there is something in relation to this influence thing and how we are influenced by other. I feel like, especially in the recent 10 years or something, since we are starting to talk a lot about taking risk and how your life would improve when you take risk, there is also this stigma around it that if you don't take the risk, then you are a failure or you're not going to be successful. Then people start to feel shame that they are not taking a certain risk, even though it was the right decision to not take that risk. And I feel like
It's
this is
not
something
only
important
this.
to mention.
It's not only this as well, but it's also the other. What you said is one side of the coin, and I guess what I'm about to say is the other side of the same coin.
I think
Which
it's
is-
important because sometimes we feel like you talk to someone about something and about a risk you want to take, and like, oh, you have to take this risk, you have to do it, and then you start to
Exactly.
feel the pressure
It's
and
because-
shame if you don't take it, even though maybe your intuition is right and you shouldn't take this path.
Which is why, and I've said this before, when I'm making big decisions, I don't let anyone know.
Yeah,
And
yeah. That's one way to go.
I don't
around
let
it.
anyone get included in that decision, and no one knows what decision I'm gonna make or that I'm in that process of making the decision until the decision is over. And when it's over, I'll tell people. And when they start telling me what they think about the decision that I made, I'm just like, no one asked.
Yeah.
Like, take it however you want
That's
to.
pretty important.
Like,
because-
take it however you want to. But when I'm telling you about my decision, I'm not telling you because I want feedback. I'm telling you because you wanted to know what happened.
Yeah.
So I'm just telling you what you want to know. But I'm not asking for feedback. And even if you give me feedback, that got nothing to do with it. So, like, in a lot of areas in my life, I'm more open to discussing them and trying to, learn something from another person.
But not this thing.
But not when it comes to bigger decisions.
Especially because it's very subjective. So there's
It's
feedback.
not only this, but if somebody influences that decision that I'm gonna make, or like you said, they kind of tell me, no, there's a risk there, there's this and
They
that.
start to attach some shame and guilt to it in some way.
Then the decision is not purely mine.
Yeah.
And then if the decision that I end up taking is wrong, I'm gonna end up pinning it down on them.
That as well.
When it's just my responsibility for taking the wrong decision or for letting them to include in that decision.
It's not, but what I'm trying to say, maybe you didn't get my point fully, is that some people start to see themselves as non-risk
They have
takers,
to
or
take
I
the
do
risk.
it safe.
It's
exactly. Even though in this moment you didn't have to take the risk.
In other words, from what you're saying is, which I guess applies to my generation, to a lot of people, even us, is that we both are influenced by this, which is why we are the way we are, because we want to get ahead of the race.
Sure.
And because we want to get ahead of the race, we want to get ahead of other people.
Sure.
We'll start thinking about taking more and more risks.
Yeah.
Why? Because we've heard about the race from other people, and we've
The
heard about
influence.
risks
Go
from
back to
other
the
people,
influence thing,
which is why we start thinking like, oh, maybe we should take this risk, because if I don't take the risk, then somebody else will take the risk, and then they're going to get the outcome that I should be getting from taking this risk, even though maybe you're not ready to take the risk.
Yeah.
But it's just because we want to get ahead of the rat race and ahead of people of our age, we start taking on the risk, more risks. And we let other people influence us more and more.
Yeah.
Which is why lately I've been saying to everybody, like, no, I'm just doing it at my pace,
Yeah.
If it takes me a year, it takes me a year. If it takes me 10 years, it takes me 10 years. Like, I'll just put in the work and see where it goes. I don't want people to tell me how fast, how slow, how this and this. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
See you in the next one.